All right, Ted, look who I have. Don Molarsic, Sidney Powell's defense attorney. He's joining me here outside the courthouse. We are in a verdict watch, Don. A couple of hours into deliberations. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Feeling confident?
You know, I think the case couldn't have gone any better. We emphasized the science. We emphasized the medicine. We emphasized the law. We brought them three amazing, nationally renowned experts. We talked to them about Sidney and her family and who she really is. She's not a killer. She's a person with severe mental illness, and that's what caused this crime.
You know, seeing the family show up every day for Sidney makes a powerful statement inside the courtroom. I couldn't even find a seat inside the courtroom yesterday because so many people were showing up for your client. What does that mean to her? How's she feeling today?
Yeah, well, they're showing up not only for Sidney, but they're showing up for Brenda as well. They are Brenda's voice. They know Brenda better than any human being on the planet. And when the prosecutor finds a picture of Brenda on the internet and tries to speak to her, for her, that's insulting. So Sidney appreciates, and it's been incredibly difficult. It's been torturous.
How do you feel after closing arguments? Several hours this jury heard from prosecutors and yourself. You were up close with them, looking them in the eyes. What were you seeing?
I was seeing a group of people that really are. And I'm also seeing a group that has to be struggling with what the prosecution has finally said they think the motive is, which is somehow it makes sense that Sidney would kill her mother, her best friend, because she was disappointed that she got suspended from school. That makes no sense. And I think the jury looked puzzled. They looked confused. And I think that if they follow the science, they follow the law, we're going to get to the right decision.
And I know you've been so gracious to speak with us throughout this process, and you keep telling us and the jurors to follow the science. I noticed yesterday the prosecutors saying that same thing in their closing arguments, and they have a very different science. They brought Sylvia Bradovich yesterday to testify. You extensively cross-examined her, but she reached obviously different conclusions than your experts brought forth. What's your takeaway on how that went?
Yeah, well, you know, Sylvia Bradovich is to science what Santa Claus is to holidays. She was completely subjective. She ignored the science. She completely said you can't test for mental health at the time of the offense, and that's literally what we do in every insanity case, in every courtroom across the country. So it just didn't make sense. It didn't add up. And she abandoned the scientific method. She abandoned the tools that her trade says these are the things you use to try to get it right. She was guessing. She gave them the answer that she knows the prosecutor wanted, the answer that the prosecutor asked her for before she even started looking at the data.
She met with Sidney 2 hours. There was one part that she brought up that Sidney reports as young as 11 years old that she was seeing things and having hallucinations. Right. She said that would be so uncommon, usually in women. These, and at age 11, it would be difficult for her to hide the fact that she was suffering from some of these issues when there's no evidence that she had these red flags along the way. So how would you respond?
Yeah, I disagree wholeheartedly. In fact, I think what we would experience as parents is your 11-year-old, your 12-year-old, when they're talking to someone, when they see someone, you write it off and you think it's natural. You're not going to ask questions. And that's what Sidney was experiencing. So it makes perfect sense that no one would have seen those red flags early on like that.
Now that all the evidence is in and closing arguments, we do have this jury deliberating right now. Do you have any, you're well-versed, experienced defense attorney, about how long they go or how short they go? Does that indicate anything to you at all?
It really doesn't. I mean, there's no way to predict what they're doing. I know they have a really difficult job. There's a lot of evidence. And, you know, this is one of the few trials where, as a defense attorney, I introduced more evidence than the prosecution did. We have more exhibits, more witnesses, more experts, more facts, and more science behind us.
You wanted to call a rebuttal.
Yes.
Sir rebuttal. Who were you planning to call, and why do you think the judge didn't allow that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge, huge issue in this trial. There's a decision out of our district court that says we have an unconditional right to sir rebuttal, and that is an unconditional right to challenge the testimony of the last expert. This is my burden. I have the burden of proof. And for the state's expert to go on last left me in a horrible position where I couldn't bring my experts on to challenge some of her statements. Statements like, we can't test for insanity at the time of the offense. Statements like, you don't need to do psychological testing to determine malingering. I mean, that's just false. It's absolutely false. And each and every one of our experts, Dr. Timmy, Dr. Swales, Dr. Reardon, would have testified to that. So the fact that the jury didn't get to hear that, I think, is huge.
Okay, so I'm going to toss it back to Ted Rollins in Atlanta's studio here. But Ted, do you have any questions for Don Malarkey before we let him go?
Yeah, one quickie. He seems really connected to his defendant. Is there something special here, or something that's more motivating? Something that what's going on?
Sure. Ted, as all of us can see how connected you are to your client, Sydney, and her family. At the conclusion, we were just talking about the conclusion of your closing argument. It was emotional and personal for you.
It was.
Talk about that. I mean, you defied an objection to say what you wanted to say.
It's been tough, you know. Sydney reminds me a lot of my daughter. And throughout this trial, I've tried to ask, you know, what would Brenda do? And I asked that question before I started my closing argument. And what came back to me was, make sure that Sydney knows I love her. And before I started my closing argument, I leaned over and I said, Sydney, Brenda loves you and I do too.
We were wondering, we could see that moment where you kind of leaned over and whispered. Now we know, everyone, what exactly was said in that moment. But that makes a difference inside the courtroom. We really appreciate your time and your advocacy for your client, and wish you the best. We'll see what the jury does. You'll be hanging around here. Y'all are close by, right?
I got nowhere else to go.
Okay. Well, we will be here to cover it, and we appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you so much, Don.